Welcome back to the Boring Show, folks. I've got Fitz here with me today, and we've got a great episode planned. Fitz, you obviously need no introduction. Would you maybe like to introduce what we are talking about today?
Sure. Yeah. So we've spent some time a lot recently working with this Hacker News app as the basis, and it's getting kind of long in the tooth. So we're going to talk about building up a new app, and we're going to start as our basis the skeleton template that is floating around a little bit. You may or may not have seen it, but we're going to start there. And so Craig's going to be driving for us, and we've got his VS Code window open here, and we're just going to start literally from Flutter Create, but using not the counter app that you get with just a normal Flutter Create. We're going to go from this special option, this -t skeleton, and that's going to give us a app that has a little bit more going on with it. And we're going to use that as the basis to add stuff that looks like a real app. And I think, Craig, you had an idea for what that real app looked like.
Yes, right you are, Fitz. So we were talking a little bit before the show and came up with the idea of just making a little bit of a personal assistant app. So this might show the weather. This might show your next meeting in a specified Google Calendar, whatever other doodads we end up stapling onto it. But the point of it, in terms of the Boring Show, is going to be to A, explore the skeleton app, and then B, talk about if you wanted to use the skeleton app, okay, where do you actually start going? Where do you slice open? Where do you put in new features? We're going to actually kick the tires on this thing and try to build something.
Yeah, exactly. So unlike the counter app that you normally start with, this one has a little bit of opinions in it in terms of how it's structured and where things go. And so it takes a little bit of touring around to find things first. And we're going to do that. And that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, so I just called it Assistant. Is it going to open in this same window? No, new window. Nice.
Uh-oh.
Love it.
I think you might be able to, there's a open button right under the start here. I don't know. That might replace the current window.
Open recent? No, it's not recent. Open workspace. That's what we want, I hope. And, this is what I was just doing a second ago. I'm in development. I think I'm in, what did I call this? Assistant? I think it's in this folder. Oh, no, I don't even know. Where are we? Well, I'm in my home directory. We're off to a great start, folks. Okay, so that...
Everyday developer problems. Which directory did I put this file in?
Right. Assistant, there we go. Well, we'll move this later, but for now... Ta-da! Yeah, I think I trust myself.
Yeah.
Okay. Easy peasy.
All right, so where do we start with every app?
Well, yes, main.dart. It looks pretty different in the skeleton app. We still see we've got run app, which is, using an app of your, it's using your kind of root widget, but all the other decoration that was in the original one file, just main.dart, starter, counter app that we all know and love, everything else has been moved out. We do have a little bit of dependency injection stuff already set up, so we can see here that different controllers and services are being initialized outside of our widget tree. That's a great start, and then they're being injected in. Part of what we're aiming to do today is write a few tests for these, so we're going to be able to mock out our settings service, and that's great because it's already not being initialized in widgets. Keep that one in the back of your mind, kids. And then most of the rest of the app starts to show up in this source directory. And in here, we start to have feature-specific folders. Some people like to go kind of application layer-specific folders, others feature-specific. I myself am also on team feature-specific folders, so that's nice we have here.
Yeah, and I like it too. just in case you have like different teams working on different things, because I could imagine a much larger app, say, having a team or a small team or maybe just a dev. Maybe your team is the size of one, but that's fine. You might have a team focused on localization because there's a lot that could potentially go there. And so you want to have that maybe separated out, just easier if it's in one directory rather than shared with a bunch of other stuff across layers. So I'm definitely team feature based as well.
Yeah, nice. So we do have a couple errors here. They are fake errors. All we have to do is hydrate our pub.lock file and get everything installed. And now the fake errors are gone. So let's see. This is sitting in source app.dart. Oh, I didn't even notice it down here below the folders. Huh, yeah, there it was hiding. Okay,
there
so app.dart, this is our root widget. So let's give this a little peek here. I need to close this out. Okay, so what we have in the root of our main widget is not a lot. We can see that settings controller is coming in. If you use the skeleton app and you start to add more things to it, you will obviously have more things appear, more parameters will appear here. You might actually inject them from provider at some point. We might explore different options for that kind of thing. And then everything is wrapped in an animated builder. You do see your standard material app. The animated builder is, its animation is the settings controller. That's actually an interesting, that's a first detail that jumps out at me.
I was squinty eyeing at that as well. It was curious to me. I mean, it makes sense that I guess the animation builder is going to be looking to the animation for when it notifies of changes, right? That's the whole point of the animation builder, right? Is to say like, hey, we've got a new frame, and the value of this has changed in some way based on whatever curves or lerping that we're doing between values, and maybe the settings controller. I have no idea what it's doing. Actually, I haven't looked in depth at this app yet, and so maybe the settings controller is doing something similar, like listening for. Or maybe updating things based on that.
Yeah, so I was wondering the same thing. So I just did a little command clicking here, and the settings controller implements change notifier, or uses it as a mix-in or inherits from it. One of those things.
Yeah.
And if you look in the, then I clicked into animated builder, which puts us in transitions.dart deep in the framework. And that animation parameter is a listenable, which change notifier must be, because this works. And change notifier does, in fact, implement listenable. So that is why our controller was able to satisfy that animation parameter, which does kind of look a little confusing at first.
Yeah, it'll be curious as we go through how this animated builder is being used to see. Like, I'm curious why animated builder and not animation builder and not like value listenable builder or whatever it's called, right?
Yeah, so I think a part of that is that what this is doing right now, the settings that this is controlling, is just the theme. So I'm guessing that the animated builder is simply to lerp the theme. So
okay,
let's build this.
Let's see if that gets verified as we look through the code. I believe you. I'm just, let's check it out. So while that builds, do you want to scroll down a little bit, because we've got builder returns a material app and. What is that? Restoration scope ID. Ooh, some state restoration is happening there.
Looks like a great topic for a future episode.
Yeah, and then localization diagnostics, also maybe an interesting thing.
Delegates, but we're ready to localize.
Yeah.
And then this only supports English and nothing, unspecified to start. But we have the scaffolding in place when we're ready to start localizing our app. We have everything in place to, we know where to start typing more localizations. So what the skeleton app gives you is a root list view that has just some items that go to other pages. There's not a lot of exciting stuff on these other pages, but this means that the skeleton app has some routing baked into it. And so these are all the same, not too exciting. On the root page, under the debug banner, so almost entirely hidden, is the gear icon. And this is where settings happen. So this opens up a new page where we have the system theme is the current selected theme. And so that is obviously the same as light in our current situation. But if we go to dark, it did animate. Fitz, I'm not sure how well you're able to see each of those intermittent frames, but the animated builder is getting us a kind of swoosh from one theme to the next.
Is it the animated builder doing that, or is that part of just a material app? Because I know there's a lot of things that are animated just by built in with various material widgets and material things. So that's where I'm curious if as we scroll through here, this builder, there should be like a controller value used at some point, and so I'm curious where that gets.
Yes, so that's on line 61 here, ThemeMode.
Mode.
Yeah, that's a great point. This may be getting lerped within material app. So let's just peek at that real quick. And we're going to look in here for ThemeMode. And it's got that default looking good. Where are we down here? This is theme. I think we're going to ultimately need to peek at the build function. We can just material app state.
Well, I wonder if before you get too far into there, because I think we're going to get
there's a lot
it's going to redirect us elsewhere potentially. What is the settings controller theme mode? What is that? Like what kind of value?
That is, I see what you're saying. So yeah, we want to look at theme mode. I'm guessing this is an enum. Yes, it is an enum. So we've got system light and dark.
Okay.
Yep. And then if we look at our controller, I sure do expect that we'll see that. Yeah, we've got the same variable type, which is going to be that same
late. And what is it default? Like, can you find where's the constructor? What do we get? Settings. We get it from the settings service. So what is the? My question here is what is the default theme mode when we just open up the skeleton app?
So we've got this, there's interesting here. We've got redundant defaults pointing to system because that is the default in material app, which we just saw as I thumbed through that file. And it's also the default in the settings service. And here we have, actually, this is already kind of worth looking at because there's two methods in the settings service and they don't do a lot, as you can see. But we've got comments here that talk about why does this class exist and why do these methods exist. So theme mode says loads the user's preferred theme mode. I'll get these tooltips out of the way from local or remote storage, which doesn't happen yet. But in adding local and remote storage, to this app will be a pretty useful academic exercise, I think.
Yep, there's a previous Boring show, I think, where we did this in the Hacker News app. So maybe we can do that offline just to get it done. That is true. I think the only thing that would be interesting about that would be talking about its kind of elegant intersection with the existing vibes and like with the system, with the architecture that the skeleton app is going for, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think because what we're talking about here is basically state management. And the way you'll notice we don't have any particular package that this is using at the moment. It's just a change notifier in a thing. And so, I said at the outset, this is kind of an opinionated way of getting started with an app. And so what is the opinion here? And it's that, for your basic app, you probably don't need anything too fancy for your state management. So we just have a change notifier and that's it. And that's going to provide us with most of what we need, at least at the beginning for how to manage our state.
Yeah, sounds good. I agree with all of that, Fitz. So let's see. We've hit a bit of the tour here. There's some more. We've got on generate title. I'm not going to lie. This is a method that I have not seen before we saw on Material App, right? Fitz, do you know much about on generate title?
I have no idea. From the name of it, I would assume that we are building the title bar for how the app shows up, whether that's a desktop or mobile app. What is the window called, right? When you open up the app switcher on your phone, sometimes there's a label that says what the thing is called. That's my guess, just based on the name and nothing else. But I don't know. What does it say?
Apps title string. Yeah, I do think it's that it's at the OS level, like you said. I think you are correct there. At least that's what I'm gathering from this doc string.
What was it set to back in app.dart?
It was just a wrapper around some localization.
Oh.
So app localization of context and then app title.
Okay.
Where is this coming from? Oh, this is in our app localizations. So, I am actually fairly new to localizations myself. So there must be, let's go back to.
This looks generated.
Oh, is this in every app?
Based on the path, yeah.
Yeah, and it even says here it is assistant. Yeah, I think you're right.
What is under our source, so lib source localization, what's there? Do we have like an app title that gets set there?
Here we go. Yes, app title. There we go. Nice. Well, let's capitalize that because that's already just a little painful. Now, Fitz, to regenerate that is just a Flutter pub get, right? Or do we have to use build runner?
To be honest, I'm not sure. It might be just a pub get. It's a good question. We can try it and see what happens.
Yeah, let's see.
That's what generated it in the first place, and so
where was that? We want to command click back into this. Well, oh, actually, it's upset with us now.
Uh-oh.
It no longer thinks that I'm going to reload the window. This happens sometimes.
What happened? What was...
localization sometimes just get a little stale or like out of sync with the IDE on rebuilding. So let's see now if it's happier. It seems to kind of still be initializing.
Oh, it does. It did have a capital A. Yep, there you go.
Nice. Oh, right, because this is a doc string, so it was appearing on this mouse over. I wasn't even looking at it.
Yep.
But yes, there it is. Great. Okay.
Cool. Okay. Solved that. Next parameter. We've got some theming data. We just talked about that a little bit. Got some routing.
Yeah, now there's a lot of routing options out there in Flutter, as everyone knows. So again, this is using a fairly kind of off-the-shelf, pretty much only using tools that are in the core framework. And it is just, we've got a switch statement here. So we're looking at each route name and then returning that page.
Yep. And that's our routing.
All right.
This particular one, I don't think needs anything special. In maybe a future case instance, we'll look at deep links or some other kind of fancy-ish routing or nested routers or anything like that. But for now, just kind of clicking around is totally fine for a basic app.
Okay, sounds good. So, Fitz, what we talked about earlier was focusing on getting some tests in place for this settings controller, because that will allow us to kick the tires in another very important way. We're going to make sure that we can validate correctness of our UI responding to the controller, and we can make sure that our whole setup is ready for good dependency injection. And if we are going to local storage at some point in the future to get how the user has set their theme settings, our tests need to be able to operate without local storage. So we'll want to make sure that our UI responds in a hermetically sealed bubble. So
okay, so let's write some tests then.
Yeah, let's do it. So we have our unit test here, which, okay, this is basically testing that the test framework works. And then our widget. Yeah, our widget test, this, I forget if this still comes from the original starter. Oh, no, the original starter test does have some count-based tests. It taps the button and then makes sure that 1 appears. So let's see if this test is ready to go.
And running.
Yeah, it's building. First build sometimes takes a second. Hey, all right.
All
so
tests fast.
There was a hello. Oh, wait, what is this test even doing? This makes a material app. This doesn't test any of our stuff. This literally just makes a new material app and a scaffold. Yeah. It doesn't use our widgets.
Hey, but it runs and it passes, so that's good.
Indeed. It's better than if it failed.
Yep.
By a lot. Okay, let's start using our stuff. So as we pop back over to main.dart, we can see here that my app is the first widget of our creation, and it's the first thing that accepts a parameter of our creation, which is obviously the settings controller. And the settings controller accepts itself the settings service. Now, if we pop back over to the settings service, my money is on this being the item that we want to either mock or fake. How do you feel about that, Fitz?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that's the thing that is actually providing the data to the settings controller. And I mean, it's more or less just a data class of some kind, right? I mean, it has a getter of the theme mode and has a setter of the update.
Setter. Yep. All right, let's make a new folder in test, and we will call this settings. And then we'll make a new file in settings, and we'll call this settings service test.dart. Now
you mentioned both either a mock or a fake. What do you prefer? Where do you think?
I do prefer fakes, and I guess we should talk about the difference between those.
What do you think is the difference? What in your mind? I have a thought in my mind of the difference. Yeah. What's yours?
So to me, a mock is a class that you basically just tell it, when I call a certain function, give me a certain answer. And there is no internal state. There's nothing happening in the mock. It is just a shell of memory somewhere in the computer, and it is an excellent player of Simon Says. And a fake is very different. A fake still implements the same methods, but it actually has real implementation inside. So if we were going to fake out our settings service, we would, for example, let's say this ThemeMode method actually did go to local storage. For our tests, we would make a settings service fake class, and it wouldn't go to local storage because the test doesn't have to persist across launches of the app. The test just has to say, verify that the UI responds to something. So our fake settings service will just have an internal variable. And whenever we call update theme mode, it will just set that variable. And whenever we hit the getter theme mode, it will return that internal variable. So that fake is very different than a mock, though you can build an identical test with either.
So I think the key is whether update actually changes something.
Correct. Yeah, I think that is, and if we go back to the controller, because that is where this is all going to be glued together. What is actually going to be called from the UI is, of course, not the service. It's the controller. And so we have a similar method here, update theme mode. And so when we create this fake or mock of the service, a new theme mode variable or value is going to come in. And it ultimately, so, first we notify our listeners, but then this also goes to the service and persists. And then when notify listeners is called, that's interesting. I'm noticing now that the controller also maintains a variable instead of going to the service, just being a pass-through. And this actually means that it is possible that in some future update of our app, we could introduce a bug that desyncs our controller and service. Because, and certain tests might not identify that because the controller is also maintaining its own variable here. And it is not routing straight through.
I wonder, maybe if we poke more through, we would see like where is load settings only called in the beginning in the loading of the app, or does it get called elsewhere, like when settings are changed? But I'm curious if the intention with the service setting is that, or the setting service is that it's more, it's the data layer for those settings, whether we're calling out to local storage, whether we're calling to a Firebase API, whether we're calling to some other cloud service. There are a couple other cloud services I've heard of, but it's always Firebase. So and so maybe like with that API layer, right? We don't know, we have no guarantee on how fast the thing is going to respond and give us the data, and so that's just our asynchronous data layer where we can potentially get more data or update the settings, but we still need that low latency, immediate access to the settings because our theme is relying on that. And so I think that's where maybe the settings controller comes in and why it has its own notion of that value.
Yes, that maps to exactly what, and I think the latency issue that you were talking about, like maybe this is actually persisted up to Firestore, which of course, if you're just thinking about someone having the app on a single device, feels like a bit of overkill versus local storage, but maybe they're going to download your app on multiple devices and they want their settings to be synced across any device that they load the app in. So then you would need remote storage. But it's this future here, which is what the service returns. So it's prepared already to go somewhere else far away and get the answer. And I definitely agree, Fitz, that is why. But now I want to run something by you. This settings controller has this is where the value is stored. Do you think that should just be in the service? Yes, it is a puzzlement, huh? I think they're going to... It's going to stop being obvious what the boundary is between them, actually. Because then the settings controller will really be nothing more than a handful of pass-throughs. It'll pass through every method, and it'll pass through variable access.
Yeah, I like the idea of maintaining the service as the thing that actually has the mechanics for retrieving those settings. Okay.
All right. So this takes us back to the original statement of mocking out the service, and I still think that is correct. But I think we'll need to be mindful of how this method is implemented, because we talked about mocking out the service, which is only informed of the change here. But the interesting thing is the UI is informed of the change before. So we could write a test that mocks the service And in doing so, and then we could comment out line 49, and our UI-based test would pass. Because the mocked service would at that point be completely pointless, because we have the variable stored in the controller. So the UI would continue to work. And what would break is that nothing would persist. And when the user reopens the app later, their setting would not have been saved, and they would go back to the default theme mode, but our tests would not find that.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I mean, well, that's we would want to talk about the scope of our test then, and what is it testing, right? Because you're describing how the UI will look when the user changes the setting. There's a different test of, is it persisted? And I think those are two different tests, and one of them is testing the controller, and one of them is testing the service. Well, even the UI showing the updated change is not necessarily testing the controller. It's testing any theme-related widget that needs to pick it up, right?
Yeah, it would assume that that the UI isn't keeping itself up to date by some other means. It would be assuming that the controller is the middleman connecting all the dots.
Yeah, because you would, because there could be a situation, right, where you have a button or an icon or something with a hard-coded color or a hard-coded even theme, like theme.primary color or something, and maybe it doesn't get picked up by the light-dark switch. And so controller could be working perfectly fine, setting the new theme mode, informing the settings service, informing the listeners, and then everything doesn't change. That could be a potential thing. And so when you're writing the tests, maybe think about that scoping as well on how low level, if we were testing the UI, what is actually being tested there.
Dedicated Boring Show viewers may recall us tripping over exactly that last episode.
Yeah, exactly.
So this highlights that of tests that we can think about writing right now for the little bit of functionality that is in this app currently. It's kind of the handoff between the UI and the controller. Then there's another handoff between the UI and the service that can be tested as well. And then lastly, and trickiest to test, is the handoff between the service and the actual persistence, whether it's local or remote. And that one I think we're definitely not going to get to today, though it is a very interesting topic.
No, we'd have to implement that local storage in the first place because it's not implemented yet. So yeah, you were saying today.
Yeah, so today I think we can focus on the first two handoffs, UI to controller and controller to service.
Yes.
If that sounds good to you.
That sounds good.
All right. So let's do it. Let's go back to main.dart. I think we can close this. Yeah, we mostly remember what's in here. And then we have settings, the settings page. I'm going to make this tab first. And what do you think where can we get a win first? Is it the UI to controller handoff or the controller to service handoff? I think it's the latter, not to lead this completely.
I think it is the latter as well, controller to service, in particular, because that'll force us to write the mock or fake or whatever we want to do.
Yeah, I agree.
Right, so that'll get us started, and then once we have that mock, then we can do the UI handoff. Yeah.
So what I think we want to start here is we want a test that calls update theme mode, gives it a value, and then verifies that the internal service is updated, and verifies then that theme mode from the controller itself also is updated. So what our test is going to do is basically verify that line 42 doesn't get commented out. And our test is going to be able to verify that line 49 does not get commented out. But it will be different tests that catch if line 45 is commented out, because that's the handoff between the UI and the controller.
Yeah.
And making sure that the service actually does anything. That is, of course, the trickiest of the things to worry about. That makes sure that's the third, the deepest layer, which we're not working on today.
Yeah. So rather than start from top or bottom, we're starting squarely in the middle.
Yeah, I think yes. But I think that will be the most straightforward. So let's do it. Now, do you think that we should create a generic interface for this settings service, or does the existing class, will that be sufficient and we can just extend it in our test?
I think we can just extend it.
Okay. So
I think there's potentially an argument of making I could see having it be an interface so that you ensure that your test is always implementing all of the latest production code for it. I think that's a potential argument, but for now, let's just extend and
sounds good.
Go from there.
Okay, so we're making. I don't know how other people make test files. I just type in all the things. I bet there's a lot of good snippets out there.
I'm sure there are. Yeah.
All right, so let's say this is going to be the service controller dot update theme mode should, and then we'll get this going. Now we'll make a test file. And what should service controller dot update theme mode do? Well, it should how do we want to say this? Inform the service of the value. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay. Now in here, we can make our class. So this will be class fake. Well, also I gave a long diatribe about fakes versus mocks and my thinking. How do you feel about fakes versus mocks? And do you have a thought for what we use?
I think your definition was fine. I don't have a different definition. I don't know that I have an opinion on which we use right now.
So I think mocks are more common, and for that, let's give a little exposure to fakes. How about that? Let's do
sounds great.
Fake setting service, and
I think that'll probably help us with verifying that the controller gets an updated value, so we can actually change it potentially.
We import the class that we need, and now we need to override both methods. So we'll grab those real quick. Paste them in. Yep, we do have a little more importing to do. Oh. There we go. And okay, cool. So now, of course, this needs a closing curly. And let's create a value here. So update theme mode. This should basically just set to ourselves. So this will have a theme mode variable, and we will save it. I wonder if this being, oh no, we're in the same file, so we'll be able to hit that private variable. And then our getter will, of course, return theme mode, and to continue to mirror actual behavior, we'll default this to theme mode.system.
Yeah.
So this is
it is non-nullable in the actual setting service. Is that right?
Yes, because, well, it's actually the settings service. Yeah, it does not return. Yes, it is. Okay. There's no question mark. So it does not return a nullable theme
no
mode.
Question here. It is definitely a theme mode. Great.
Yep. Okay, so what are you? You probably want the override tag. Yep. Override. And again, Okay, so we have the simplest fake settings service of all time. And it looks pretty low value, except that actually our file is not even really accurate anymore. This isn't the settings service test. Let's move this file. This is the settings controller test.
Yeah, so we've changed that. And especially, it definitely can't be the settings service test because we just wrote a new implementation of the settings service. And so it wouldn't be testing anything valuable.
Sure wouldn't. Now, it is also valuable to test your fakes and your mocks because if you write a broken fake, boy, can that lead to other headaches. This fake is so simple, we'll just take some liberties. But in general, if you have a complicated fake, it can use its own tests. All right, here we go. So we've got a settings controller, and it takes a fake settings service. And I don't think it was it was a positional parameter. Great. So here we'll have a final settings controller. All right. And if we say settings controller.update theme mode, and this will be ThemeMode.dark, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We can now expect that our setting, actually, you know what, we're going to need to hold on to our service in a variable because it is not accessible through the controller.
Yeah. Or is it?
We'll call this. I thought it was underscored.
It
is underscore. So we won't be able to access it in our test unless we hold on to it first. Is that vibing with your understanding of everything, Fitz?
Yeah.
All right, so we will expect that our controllers dot theme mode attribute, and that itself is a pass-through to its own underscore attribute, so that's fine. This should equal theme mode dot dark. And then after that, we want to expect that our service dot this is fine because we're in the same file, so we can access underscore private variables because we're in the same file. So our service dot theme mode should equal theme mode dot dark with a lowercase d.
Cool.
All right.
Let's run it and see what happens.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we've done a lot, but I really like to congratulate myself, so I think we've done a ton.
Yeah.
And it already fails.
And then we get errors. Great.
Nice. Yeah.
So it's not a real test if you don't get errors right at the beginning.
That's right. So theme mode has not been initialized. All right, so this is in the controller.
Oh, because if you go back to the main.dart, for example, there's it calls load settings first. That's like the very first thing that it does in order to populate all those values. So that pulls it from the service.
Okay, so we can simply make this an async test. That'll be fine. And then we called this controller.
Yep.
Then I'll keep typing settings everywhere. And so now we've got our setup and our stuff. Great eye on that. I was about to flounder indefinitely. Have no idea what to do.
And then all tests pass. Hooray! We got it.
Yes. Now, let's really prove to ourselves that our tests what we think it tests. So I asserted earlier that if this line was commented out, the test we were writing now would complain.
Okay.
And let's find out.
And
this should fail. Great.
Hooray. Looks like
because
it failed.
We didn't update what the controller thinks the setting is from system to dark. So we expected dark in the test, but we still got system. Perfect. And now, further down the test, it should fail here because if this line ever gets commented out, our test will notice that the service is not updated.
Looks like it.
It is a very similar error, but it's further down in the file, in the test file by one line. Okay, We did it. We
Cool.
wrote a test. Now we get to the way harder part of doing things with widgets.
With the UI.
Yes. So we can, our controller test, this is looking awesome, and we can close it. And app.dart, who are you? This is us. We're going to need this file.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to keep this unit test because it's really fancy. Yeah, we like these other tests. I don't want to go down to just one test. I'm not ready for that. I like having 3. It's way better. Okay, let's see what we're doing here. We don't actually need, like, just thinking out loud here about how we're going to test this UI. What we care about is the settings view. We actually, oh no, that is not strictly true because the settings view, we will actually need our implementation of my app because our whole controller does the handoff here.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so we will need, actually in that test file, do we want to do widget tests in this same file? I think we can.
I think we can.
Yeah.
I think
so
that's
this
fine.
will be a widget test, right?
Yep.
And what the update theme mode should do here is inform the UI of the value.
So is there a particular UI element we want to check for to make sure it pulls it up?
Widget test is not defined. Are we misremembering this?
Just pop it into one of the unit tests or one of the pre-populated files and just double check what it says.
Oh yeah,
what they use.
Right. There's literally a file here that tells us, oh, it's just plural.
Test widgets.
Test widgets. Oh, actually, it's plural and the other order. I really did well. Not widget test, but test
widgets.
Widgets. Okay.
Cool. That's defined. Great.
And now this needs to take the awesome helper parameter here, the widget tester. Cool. What are you upset about? Does this need to be async? Is that just required? I think it has to be.
It looks like it
has to be required. Okay. Here we are. So we know that we are going to need a my app.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say const my app. I wonder if const is going to make sense here. I don't know. I might be setting us up for failure.
Yeah, we can try it.
Now, my app, of course, is not prepared to accept just no parameters because
it needs the controller.
Needs the controller. Exactly. And an optional key that we don't really care about right now. So
you should probably also name the my app const. Oh no, you did. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
It's
okay.
small. It's fine. Settings controller.
So we need to basically copy all of these things. Next question, should we use the fake service? It shouldn't matter because this test only cares about the handoff between the UI and the controller. So the service can be doing literally nothing. The service can be out to lunch. This test shouldn't care. So we'll use the fake service.
Yeah, I was going to say we should probably make sure that we're just testing as few things as possible. And for that, our fake service would be useful.
Yep. Because eventually the real service is going to do more interesting things than it currently does.
Yep.
And that's not, you're right. That is not the point of this test. So we will add the controller, which was this also a positional parameter? I thought it was named.
I don't think so. I think it's a settings controller is the parameter name.
Okay, it's unknowable.
Was I wrong?
I had thought you were right. Oh, we might need to import it.
Maybe.
There we go. Now we'll also get, it's called settings controller. You're right. But
what are we complaining about now?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. It says type null can't be assigned in a const constructor.
Settings controller.
What? Required, and we definitely passed it. And it is that all seems fine. Try using a subtype or removing the keyword. Oh, it's because our controller is not const.
Oh.
But can our controller be const? That's an interesting question. Can you be? There is no const. Right, because it has an internal variable that changes. So it cannot be const.
That's okay. We can just make it a not const.
So you're final, and you are also final. All right. So now, let's pop back. Let's close this widget test file, and let's look at what we've got going on. Our material app. This, we may need to give a key. Actually, we can probably just find the material app. But at some point, we're going to need to check that the material app in my app has the correct value. Oh, actually, there's two different tests that we could have here. One is that an update in the UI talks to the controller, right? That's the drop-down widget. When that is selected, that talks to the controller. Right. And then another consideration is that once the controller gets something different, that animated builder flow kicks in and the UI actually updates. So here, we're talking about the controller informing the UI. So we can actually just poke the controller ourselves. We don't have to come in via the form.
Yeah, so we can do our same controller.update theme mode, and then choose a widget to check. We might want to choose a widget to check first, get its current color value or theme value, whatever we want to choose, depends on what kind of widget we're looking at. And then check that it is what we expected to change to afterwards. What did you what were the two lines you just added? Oh,
I just carried you. You inspired me to check the values pre-edit in the previous test.
Right. Okay, cool.
So we want to do the same thing here. So we're going to grab an app, and I'm not going to lie, this code, I always forget how it looks. But we want, it's like tester.find, right? No, I'm already off target. We have to get a finder. How do you get the finder?
I can never remember exactly how to do that.
Tester, so we do some, we call pump widget. Find is just a global function. That's what it is. So the first thing that we have to do is tester.pump widget, and we pass it my app. Then we can say find, which, the reason that this is tricky to remember is that it's just available.
Does find it what does find take? Is it just a widget or is it a key, or what is this? What does it take?
Oh, well, this is really clear. Let's actually just go back and look at our IntelliSense options. So we've got find widgets, finds. Oh, yeah, I think it takes a, let's see here. I'm looking at some docs, which I could bring into the screen. I'm going to do that. Minimize you. Ooh, really small. Let's see how this appears. Fitz, can you see the docs?
I cannot.
Okay.
It's all right.
All right. So here we've got this is a complete example of a widget related test. So we've got tester.pump widget, and that just basically loads everything, runs layout, gets everything ready for introspection. Then this is one kind of test. We, of course, don't want to look for any text. We just want to get at a specific widget. Now, the way that this isn't going to be the fastest thing that has ever happened in the Boring Show, but I am going to go to the Flutter repository and look at some tests, because those are very often drilling down into the root level material, like the test for a container, for example. They need to make sure that the material object that sits below the container has the correct color. That's how the tests verify that the container actually draws the color that you tell it to draw. And that, I think, will give us some. I pressed T here for anyone who doesn't know what UI I'm in. This gives you a file search in GitHub. And we want to look at some widget tests. Oh, but unfortunately the path, let's see, material, and then app testing. Okay, here we go. Actually, I do have some better fuzzy matching right now than I remember in the past. Chip test, I think, is going card test. Let's look at card tests. This will surely have some of what we want. So up here, we're making some, that's testing directionality. Let's just search for color. Actually, let's search for theme. Are there tests here for themes? Okay. So this should do some theme stuff. So we make the widgets, that's good. And then here we say tester.widget material. And then, so find by type, that's what we're gonna wanna do. I'm actually just gonna copy this whole line because I think there's no easier way than doing that. Okay, so we've got this same tester passed in. The widget that we want to look for is, let's pop
not
back.
Material. Would that? Are you thinking something in that settings view?
Well, that's interesting. We could do that. I'm not sure.
What were you thinking?
I guess material app. I think that's what we want. Yeah, we want to look for the material app. And then we're just going to look at its value for
that's
its
theme data, or theme mode rather value. Okay.
Yeah. And I just keep going to the wrong files. Okay, so we're going to try to find the material app located within what we have just what we've just fired up with pump widget, and that's my app, and we know that my app contains a material app, so it should find it, and it's going to find by type, again, material app. And then here we want the theme mode. I think we are in danger of this maybe working, if you can believe
maybe
what
working.
What are the parameters doing here? Oh, the tester. Yeah. It's this. This is what we want.
Yeah, and then replace that clip with
theme mode dot system to start, because we haven't done anything yet.
Yeah, and then we're going to do the update theme and then do the same expect, but with dark.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this is starting to look really real.
Yeah, this
almost.
Is like almost assuming it works. What do we think our odds are?
50-50.
It's hard to argue with that. If it fails, I think it's going to be potentially on the finding. But let's find out. So while it runs, we can pop into material. No, we already know that it's accessible because we were allowed to find it here. So,
yeah. And it failed. Exception. What does it say?
We need to await.
Oh.
Sorry.
Let's try it again.
I'm so sorry, Flutter test.
Well, that was that 50-50 success or fail.
Mm-hmm.
And fingers crossed.
We need to do more.
Wait.
Apparently.
What are we doing
here? So actual was still system. Interesting. Now,
does the update theme mode? That's not an async function, is it?
Oh, it is. It is. It is. Oh, async
does
is
that
not
mean
the word that we type?
Does that mean we forgot to await it in the first test as well?
Oh, interesting question. Let's go back. And we need to pump widget again. That, I think, is the issue. We do need to await it, but we are going to need to pump the widget again. That is what makes it actually continue to draw. And then up here...
we also need to await again the pump widget?
Good call.
All right, let's give it a try again. Fingers crossed again. And...
big money, big money, big money!
Aha! Okay, now, before we call it good and quits, I want you to try the same thing we tried with the first test. Go into the controller, comment out that theme mode.
Oh, yeah. That is
wait, is that gonna...
app still, right? You're talking about commenting out line 61?
Um,
I think this is
yeah,
what you're talking about.
I think so. I was thinking either that one or within the controller where it sets the value of its own theme mode.
Yes, I see what you're saying. What did I click? Oh, that was the DevTools. Come back. Okay.
It's like
Great
uncomment
point.
that, go into the controller.
And it's the notify listeners, right?
Yeah, let's try that one. Because that should not notify that top level material app that things have changed then, and it should fail.
And
Aha!
it did fail.
Great.
And how helpful is the error? Yeah, it's just the same one. Got the wrong theme mode value. All right.
Okay. Well,
Get
I mean, that brings us right to an hour. So just to recap what we talked about pulling in starting an app from the skeleton app. So that's the -t skeleton or -- template equals skeleton when you do your initial Flutter create. We kind of talked through a little bit at the top level what the skeleton app is and looks like. So that main.dart is super simple, and it just pulls in this settings controller for your theme data and hands it off to the material app. And so then we used that as our basis to start this and say, let's build some tests to figure out if that settings controller is properly passing things around, both down to the settings service and then back up to the UI layer. So that's what we did.
That's what we did. And a little less tripping and falling than usual, which I feel pretty good about. One thing I'd also like to highlight for everybody is do not be afraid to pop open the Flutter source, and especially for tests. I mean, I've written some of the tests in these files, and I can still never remember how to do this. So there are so many good test examples especially for widget tests, which are very, at least for me, maybe you're all better at remembering this, very hard for me to remember. And I always just pop in here and grab something that looks similar. And, that's the easiest way for me.
Yep, absolutely. All right. I think that concludes our Boring Show for today. Thanks everyone for listening in, watching in, and we'll see you on the next one.